Joining us now, Michael Crowley, diplomatic correspondent for the New York Times. Eddie Glaude is James S. McDonald Distinguished Professor at Princeton University and an MS Now contributor. Stuart Stevens was Mitt Romney's chief strategist for his 2012 campaign and senior advisor for the Lincoln Project. Michael, there are a couple of headlines in your paper today. One story you contributed to that I think are critical to this conversation. The first is Trump saying gas prices might not drop by the midterms. And then the question that was raised by your colleague, David Sanger, about which side can endure more economic pain. When you look at those, where does this leave the American people?
Thanks, Chris. In some ways, those stories run or exist in tension with one another because, I have to tell you that I was very surprised by President Trump's answer to that question. Trump has a way of kind of saying, we all remember, I alone can fix it. Everything's going to be fine. I've got this under control. He sort of creates his own reality sometimes. And so for him to concede and almost predict that gas prices will not be down substantially by the midterms was really striking to me. I think he would love to say, folks, don't worry, the prices are going to come down. And that suggests to me that he knows this problem is not close to a conclusion. And by the way, just to interject on this, even if there was a resolution on the Strait of Hormuz now, it would be some time before you would have normal energy flows throughout the world. So energy prices would take a while to come down. So maybe he's recognizing that. But I think a lot of people were assuming that Trump was desperate to get gas prices down well ahead of the midterms. And that goes to the other story you mentioned by David Sanger, which says this is going to be somewhat of a test of economic endurance. And Trump is signaling here to me perhaps a surprising willingness to tolerate higher energy prices. Last thing I would say is that also, that's smart messaging. There's a game of chicken happening here. And the more Trump is saying, hey, I can handle the high gas prices, we're in for a long ride, but it's going to be okay. That's a way of signaling to the Iranians, perhaps accurately or not, that he is dug in and that they should be the ones who capitulate as their economy increasingly nears the potential for collapse.
Eddie, just the thought of that, it's going to be okay, raises a lot of questions. It was widely reported over the weekend that President Trump was sitting cage side for a UFC fight in Miami when the talks fell apart. And then later he said this about the future of negotiations.
I don't care if they come back or not. If they don't come back, I'm fine. Their military is gone. Their missiles are largely depleted.
How are Americans supposed to view that indifference from their president, Eddie?
I think first of all, it's great to see you, Chris, is to take it for what it is, right? I think this is Donald Trump's equivalent of eating cake while everyday ordinary people suffer. He can make the claim that, it will be okay, but everyday ordinary Americans are going to have to adjust their budgets in order to pay for higher gas. You think about farmers who are going to be impacted with regards to fertilizer and their needs. He thinks that we are willing to sacrifice for his war of choice when he hasn't offered any effort to my mind, to be compelling, and a compelling effort to convince the American people that this sacrifice is necessary. So I think there's this kind of substantive judgment that Donald Trump really doesn't care about everyday ordinary folk. And I think that substantive judgment will evidence itself in the coming midterm elections.
And Stuart, to state the obvious, indifference to higher gas prices isn't exactly any Republican's dream if they're in a tight race. Is the White House statement that they are, and this is an actual statement, diligently working to mitigate disruptions going to cut it? The president's admission that, yes, this could cause gas prices to go higher. Is that going to give, at the very least, some Republicans agita?
Oh, look, I think Republicans are terrified right now. It's why so many are leaving and why they really don't know what to say because they have a president out there who's just out of control. It's interesting in a kind of classic political sense. Saying that something bad is going to happen before it happens is usually a good thing if you can tie it with the reason why it's happening and the need for it to happen. So to go back to what Michael's saying, if he could say this was a compelling reason for why the president of the United States, this is important that we pay this price, that probably is not such bad messaging because, as one of my clients used to say, be for the future, it's going to happen anyway. And he doesn't really have any control over this. But if you step back, February 25th, the Strait of Hormuz was open. Gas was under $3 a gallon. We were paying a lot less for energy across the board. Inflation was down. It's now going to triple that. So we've got nothing out of this war at a tremendous cost, and Republicans, I think, are desperately worried about it.
Michael, I think you could argue this has been a particularly bad couple of days for J.D. Vance. First, he gets sent to Hungary to support somebody who most people understood was going to lose an election. And then he gets sent to negotiate a war he didn't want in the first place. And of course, one day he's expected to run for president. I want to play what Donald Trump said in the lead up to the talks in Iran about Iran. Listen.
So if it doesn't happen, I'm blaming J.D. Vance. If it does happen, I'm taking full credit.
He's laughing like he's joking, Michael, but was he?
Oh, we all know that Trump makes these jokes, but they reveal things that he's seriously thinking. And that's the kind of incredible thing about it is, everybody's kind of adjusting uncomfortably in their seats as they pretend to laugh it off. But
can I ask you, though, do you think he sent him there knowing that in 22 hours they were not going to come up with a deal?
Well, look, Chris, it's hard to know it's always hard to know what Trump is thinking. But I don't know anyone who has any experience dealing with the Iranians who thought that there was a possibility of bridging those gaps in that amount of time. So I think you could make a good case that Trump had to have known it was going to be a kind of a suicide mission. So, you do scratch your head a little bit to the extent that he wants to prop up Vance here. If you want to kind of go to the next level with it, there's a fascinating political subplot which involves Secretary of State Marco Rubio and whether he would like to be Trump's successor. And he probably doesn't mind seeing, to the degree that he sees it as a zero-sum game. He claims to be great friends with Vance and that he's not competing with him. But if he really does want to be president, it's a zero-sum game, and he might not mind seeing Vance strike out in Hungary and Islamabad. And you have to wonder what Trump is thinking. There have been some reports that Trump is asking people about that Rubio v. Vance matchup.
And Eddie, should what happened to Vance this weekend be viewed as yet another warning to Republicans who have maybe held on to the idea that Donald Trump has their best interests at heart?
I think so. I think we've seen evidence of the break in his coalition. We know that the populist right has some deep suspicions over the corporatist wing of the Republican Party. We know that the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson and all of these folks have been screaming from the top of their lungs about the war in Iran. And so, but honestly, Chris, though, I really want to resist our traditional take on the horse race of American politics. I know we have to be mindful of it because the politics matter. I think what we need to be concerned about is that the potential for the escalation of violence, of war with Iran means that there's the potential for our loved ones to die, to be at risk. And we have to ask ourselves the question, for what? And then we have to ask ourselves the question, can we trust these people? Can we trust Donald Trump? Can we trust J.D. Vance? Can we trust Marco Rubio to act in the interest of the country and the interest of the people we love? And my answer is no. And so I understand the traditional horse race politics, but there's something much more substantive at stake here. And that is not only the future of the country, but the future of the world.
Yeah, and I think that extends to Congress, too, right? I mean, the latest CBS News YouGov poll shows 36% of Americans approve of President Trump's handling of the war. Look at that, 64% are no. And earlier today, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton made a plea to Congress to check his powers. This was on Morning Joe. Take a listen.
I just worry that he's going to become more reckless, and this is a call to the Congress, including the Republicans, to step up and do your constitutional duty. Rein in this president before he causes absolutely irreparable damage to our country, to our military standing, to our authority and leadership. Do not let him continue to be a rogue player in the international arena.
Stuart, I feel like I've asked you this question before, maybe multiple times, but are we at a point or nearing a point that somebody's going to stand up to this president in a moment when it's clear what the majority of Americans want?
If you mean a Republican, I think no. This is a party that
even for their own self-preservation, if that's what it comes down to?
Well, I don't really know how it helps you to separate from Trump at this point. If you voted for Trump 99%, which would be about the average of these Republicans, if you've gone along with everything else, so now you're going to make this break. I don't know. It's some kind of strange decision these Republicans made. And if you take the senators particularly, so a guy helps inspire a mob that comes into your workplace to try to kill you, and you still support that person. Do we really think there's going to be some policy position that they're going to cross to go, all right, no, these guys, they came in, they tried to kill us, but look, his position on the law of the sea treaty, that's just over the top. I'm not going to support it. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. It's just a total collapse of their constitutional duty, and I just don't get it. Getting elected to the United States Senate is a real pain. It takes a lot of work. It's kind of humiliating. Then you finally get there. You have 6 years, and you're a Republican, and you want to do what Donald Trump tells you to? What's the upside to it? I know a lot of these people. I helped elect a lot of them. I still don't understand it.